240 Israeli hostages remain in Gaza as the Israel-Hamas war rages on. Now both sides are saying they're closer to a deal to release some of them, Israel voting on the deal this evening. The White House says they're cautiously optimistic. NTD's Melina Wisecup reports.
Israel's special war cabinet met today to discuss a hostage exchange deal with Hamas, but it wouldn't be an all-for-all exchange. Reports are indicating that this would be around 50 Israeli women and children in exchange for around 150 Palestinians, and it also comes along with a 4-day ceasefire in Gaza, though NTD has not been able to specifically verify the details of this deal that's underway right now. Both President Biden and Israel's Prime Minister have expressed cautious optimism.
We are making progress. I don't think it's worth saying more, even at this moment, but I hope there will be good news soon.
Very close. We could bring some of these hostages home very soon, but I don't want to get into the details of things because nothing is done until it's done.
Some family members of the hostages are also growing anxious with their government and how they are balancing the priorities of countering Hamas and getting their families home.
We all feel, especially when we're talking about our families, that this should be the top priority. It doesn't mean that we should not care about taking down Hamas. Absolutely not. Nobody is claiming that. Nobody is saying that. But we definitely have a criticism on how this prioritization goes.
And the latest move here from the U.S. Congress is that 13 Democrat senators are now pressuring President Biden to make a deal with Israel for them to open up their border to allow humanitarian aid to get into Gaza. Now, the Biden administration is changing its posture on this issue. National Security spokesperson John Kirby today said that the U.S. would not support Israel military action in Gaza unless there is a plan to protect civilians. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
The Army now turning to a new source for possible recruits, unvaccinated soldiers who were previously dismissed for not taking the COVID shot. NTD's Arian Pazdar spoke with a retired Army colonel.
The military discharged around 8,000 service members for not getting the COVID vaccine. Almost 2,000 of those were part of the Army. Now the Army is trying to get those soldiers back. Earlier this month, it sent out this letter to all soldiers discharged for not getting the vaccine, writing individuals who desire to apply to return to service should contact their local recruiter. On Tuesday, the Pentagon was asked whether this applies to the entire military or just the Army.
I'm hesitant to comment just because I haven't seen the letter and the contents of it, so I'd refer you for more specifics to the Army. Yeah.
Congress already ordered the military to drop its mandate months ago. However, of the almost 2,000 discharged soldiers, less than 20 have returned.
These service members were forced out, oftentimes very ugly manner, and have gone on with their lives. And now they're being told, please come back in. Well, yeah.
John Mills is a retired Army colonel. He says soldiers might feel betrayed, which is why they're not returning. Just last year, the Army secretary said that unvaccinated soldiers are a risk to the force and that they jeopardize readiness. Now the Army is ready to hire them back and change their records from involuntary discharge to honorable discharge. However, many are also calling for back pay, something the Army is not talking about.
Are they owed back pay? Absolutely. Are they owed an upgrade to their discharge characterization? Absolutely.
Congressman Ben Klein raised the same question, asking what about reinstating them at rank and paying them with back pay? The attempt to get the soldiers back comes as multiple military branches have struggled to attract people in recent years. The Army missed its recruiting goal by 10,000 this fiscal year. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Should the U.S. trust the Chinese Communist Party? President Biden casting doubt, while some Republicans say we shouldn't believe a single word from the regime. NTD's Iris Tao has more on a recent deal in which China agreed to stop the flow of deadly fentanyl from reaching the United States.
After announcing a deal with China to curb the flow of fentanyl, President Biden now sounding skeptical about whether the Chinese regime would actually follow through. Watch.
So the United States is going to seek to work together with China to target the fentanyl components. We're not just going to trust that this is happening. We have to verify it.
During the APEC summit in San Francisco last week, the White House announced that China had agreed to work with the U.S. to crack down on chemicals needed to make fentanyl, nearly all of which come from China. For more than a year, Chinese officials have been reluctant to cooperate with the U.S. to curb this flow. And now, despite this deal, Biden's director of drug policy, Rahul Gupta, is also casting doubt on Beijing's words by pointing to the fact that the last time China had agreed to crack down on fentanyl in 2019, it just started instead to ship the ingredients needed to make it to Mexico. Republican Senator Rick Scott saying directly in a statement that he does not trust a word that Xi Jinping says, and neither should any American, including Joe Biden. Congressman Mike Gallagher also skeptical about last week's agreement.
I'm skeptical of the fentanyl agreement, I have to confess, only because we've seen this movie before. But we tend to pay cash up front, but for the CCP, the check is always in the mail.
Just last month, the Justice Department indicted 8 Chinese companies in the fentanyl supply chain. The DOJ says they use a wide range of trafficking tactics, from encrypted messaging apps to fake shipping schemes and Bitcoin payments, all to ply and cover their trade, leading to the deaths of Americans. Back to you.
As presidential primaries inch closer, recent polling causing concerns for Democrats. So who has the advantage in a potential rematch, President Biden or former President Trump? To discuss, we sit down with Matt Brainard, Executive Director at Look Ahead America. Matt Brainard, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Matt, given the kind of, I guess, anxiety, if you will, within the Democratic Party over President Biden's election prospects, with a lot of polls coming out that aren't looking favorable for him right now, how do you assess and see this all playing out, especially with California Governor Gavin Newsom waiting in the wings?
I think they're in a lot of trouble right now because they're already getting past the point of deadlines that need to be met for getting on the primary ballot in states. And those are coming hard and fast, and it's not an easy process. So switching out a candidate becomes increasingly difficult. And the decline in President Biden is stark. It's hard to recognize just how bad it is, but take video of him at any of his recent events and then put that side by side with him debating Paul Ryan in the debates back in 2012, and put those two together, and they're two completely different people. And that stark contrast, just showing that side by side and how far gone he is, there are a lot of voters who are going to vote for Biden no matter what. There are a lot of voters who are going to vote for Trump no matter what. And the election's primarily going to be decided by the people who go one way or the other. To them, that is absolutely terrifying. These are not voters who are strongly driven by ideology, because if you are, you know, it could be weekend at Bernie's, it could be weekend at Biden's, and you still vote for him. And same thing for Trump. He could get convicted on, 100 charges of felonies, right? You're still voting for him. But the people who are making those decisions, who are going to decide the election, are between the two candidates. They're not ideologically driven. What they're driven by is aesthetics and appearances of competence, as well as a few other metrics, such as, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And I don't think that people are going to hold Trump accountable for the COVID. So when the voters who are up in the air, who could go either way, they think of Trump, they don't think about Trump's economy under COVID. They think about it pre-COVID. They think about the world pre-COVID, where there was general calm in the world. We were making peace, we were killing terrorists. Or here, where jobs were abundant, wages were increasing across all demographics. And then you say, well, are you better off now than you were then? And the answer is resounding no. And the problem with the no is that the Democrats can't really counter that because they don't have the facts on their side. You can't tell someone it's sun shining when it's raining. But they don't even have an advocate. Usually it would be the president that would go out and forcefully make the case. But they just don't have somebody that can do that anymore. And I think that the panic's going to set in, and you're going to see increasingly strident attempts to get Biden to sit it out, to let somebody else emerge. But that creates its own problems because you have two wings of the party. You have folks that maybe they like Gavin Newsom. They think he's a good person, a good candidate, a good record in California. Maybe they think that. But you also have a vice president, a woman of color, and you're going to bypass her, probably somebody even less popular than Biden is, to give it to this white guy from California. So there's a real conflict in even resolving, okay, if it's not Biden, who?
You raise a lot of very interesting points, for sure. And, one other thing that we're seeing right now is some very interesting polling coming out. I believe it was NBC News. President Biden is significantly down amongst voters that he traditionally would would have those votes, whether it be young people 18 to 34, the minority vote. Why do you think he's losing these folks?
I think it comes down to the economy and the way the world is currently on fire. And many of these people are young, but they're not so young that they can't remember what things were like under President Trump. I remember the campaigns against President Trump saying, we need to get back to normal. Right now, the normal that people desire was under the Trump administration. When Trump was in president, there was a confidence that things were being handled correctly, that the economy was on the upswing. Now, whether you're young or old, you're experiencing a really difficult world. Prices are going up for everyone. Wages are not keeping pace. We see conflicts breaking out internationally that we didn't have under President Trump when people trusted that America was strong. And you wouldn't have President Putin trying to step into Ukraine. You wouldn't have Hamas thinking we can get away with this in Israel. And that just wasn't happening under him. And young people they're aware and they're paying attention. And I think that many of them are immune to a lot of the rhetoric that typically surrounds political debates. They're very realist. They're very close to what's happening on the ground. They're experiencing it. They're living it, right? It's not at a distance from them. They're in the economy. They're trying to get the jobs. They're trying to work their way up the ladder, trying to have enough money to buy a home and start a family. So they're bearing the brunt of Bidenomics. And even if they maybe thought Trump was, orange man bad, and they got brainwashed back in the day because they spent too much time on the internet, on Reddit, now the reality is sinking in. And the alternative that they're looking at, going back to Trump where things were going well, or now where they're paying 3 times as much as they were for products that were affordable in the past, and the jobs just aren't there and the wages aren't keeping pace. For many of them, it's becoming an easy choice. Maybe not a choice they're happy about, but it's becoming clearer and clearer who the best president for them is.
Matt Brainard, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.